Welcome, everyone, to our fourth episode of the first season of the Medfield College Film Society. My name's Jeff Crawford. It's good to be with you. With me are my society members tonight, Mr. Andy Brown. How's it going, Andy?
I am doing excellent, Jeff. I'm so excited to be here, and I'm very excited to talk about this movie.
Me too. What a movie. It's kind of a change of pace for us.
Yeah. It's going to be a good one.
Yes. Reporting from Central Florida, Michael Crawford. How's it going down there?
Hey, it's going great down here in the land of David Freeman. I'm really excited to talk about this one too.
Where we are, it's very, very cold. Are you still mild, or what's going on?
It
down
is
there?
actually a wee bit chilly today and yesterday. Not the same as you guys, but seasonable. I'm loving it. Got the windows
Seasonable. Well, love it. Here to Mr. Robert McSwain, the founder. How's it going?
It is going great. A nice little teaser there from Michael about the David Freeman. So we have a movie. I'm really super excited about this. This is a special movie for me as well. I think all of us feel that way, actually.
Yeah,
I'm just kind of getting that feeling. But without further ado, should we just jump into it?
Yes, today we're talking about the 1986 Disney classic Flight of the Navigator, starring Joey Cramer as David Freeman, with Veronica Cartwright and Cliff DeYoung as his parents, with a young Sarah Jessica Parker as Carolyn McAdams, with the great Howard Hesseman as Dr. Faraday, and an unbilled Paul Pee Wee Herman Reubens as Max. The movie was directed by Randall Kleiser, who had previously directed Grease, and then went on to direct such films as Big Top Pee Wee,
which is
that's marquee. White Fang, which was another Disney movie. Honey, I Blew Up the Kid. And then Honey, I Shrunk the Audience for the theme parks.
A very long-running 3D movie.
A very long-running 3D movie.
A little too long.
You know, I didn't know that Pee Wee. had been in this movie, because if I remember correct, he wasn't billed.
No, it was billed as Paul Mall. And as a kid, that really confused me, because I was like, "Oh my gosh, that's totally Pee Wee," and in the credits, it wasn't. I'm like, "Now what?" I didn't know you could just lie, and then later I found out it was actually him, and I was like, "Oh yeah, all right, yeah, totally Pee Wee." The movie is based on a story by Mark H. Baker, screenplay by Michael Burton and Mac McManus, music by Alan Silvestri, a very 80s-rific score. What do you have any comments about the music, Jeff?
Oh, I have tons of comments about the music, but this is kind of the beginning of his film career, which he does all the Marvel movies now. He's done everything. He's gone on to do a lot of Spielberg. Yeah. He kind of became Spielberg's guy. His second movie he did was Back to the Future. So there's a lot of overlap with Back to the Future and this, which we'll talk about. But this is definitely, I think it was all recorded on one synthesizer, which they say at the end.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
This was kind of an oddity, because it was originally an independent film. It was apparently pitched to Disney in 1984, and they turned it down. I haven't been able to figure out if that was under the old management or under the new management, but
it was under the old management, because I found that out today. So.
Oh, okay. So pitched to the old regime, but then when Eisner and them came in, the movie was actually made by a group called the Producers Sales Organization and a Norwegian company called Viking Film. And
those
then
great
Disney
names.
Yeah, really. Disney came in and picked up the rights for North American distribution, and it was one of the first movies that Eisner actually picked up to distribute. So maybe Robert can talk more about that.
Yeah, I found out a little bit about it today. I was doing a little research, and evidently they'd pitched it. The producers had, I can't remember the producer's name now, but he had pitched the idea, and they were looking at this, and they were looking at a remake of Treasure Island. That the producer wanted to do both of those with Disney, and whoever was in charge of the studios at the time kind of came in and said, "Hey, Katzenberg's coming in, Eisner's coming in. I got good news and bad news." He said, "The good news is I'm going to green light Flight of the Navigator, and I'm not going to be able to green light the remake of Treasure Island. But I'm going to push that through so it'll get made with the new management." And so that's how it kind of came about.
Interesting.
Yep.
So it wasn't really a Disney movie, but it wound up being a Disney movie in the end. I was reading about the CGI, and that's something we'll talk about eventually, I'm sure, but this movie really had some groundbreaking CGI. And the company, the software had been developed in part by Jeff Kleiser, who was the brother of the director, Randall Kleiser. And it just occurred to me, maybe that's why the brother in the movie is named Jeff. Anyway, he had been working at a company developing this stuff, and they went out of business. So he started his own company called Omnibus Computer Animation, and they're the ones that did the CGI, the reflection mapping, and all the morphing kind of stuff, which was way ahead of its time, really.
Oh yeah, that was crazy.
Really, really crazy.
At first, I was watching it, and I thought, did they animate this? Is this like just, because it looked so, it looked CGI.
Yeah.
I kept thinking, they weren't doing this yet, or at least not, I didn't feel like they were doing it at this level, but obviously they were. I was surprised.
I just remember that looking so cool back when we watched it as kids. And
oh, yeah. It was mind-blowing.
Thinking it was amazing, and you'd never seen anything like it, so...
And this was way before, like, Terminator 2 and all that kind of stuff, so...
T2, man.
T2.
Yeah.
Classic.
Well, I'll jump ahead here. I put in my notes somewhere as the ship was morphing. I was like, I wonder if James Cameron's watching this and thinking, maybe I could use this for some other project.
Yeah, really. Jim Cameron at Flight of the Navigator, eating popcorn.
And that was another thing. Oh, by the way, they pitched this movie for him to direct. James
really?
Cameron. I found that out today. Yeah, he was on the short list, and he really wanted to do it, but he didn't have time. And I thought that was pretty fascinating that he came real close to being the director on this.
Man,
I think it would have.
Crazy.
I mean, it was a great movie, but I think it would have been a vastly different movie with him behind the lens. But
yeah, wow, that really kind of boggles the mind.
And the director who did Karate Kid was also was on the short list. But he wanted to rewrite the whole thing. Like, they actually handed it to him and said, "Yes, you're going to be the guy." And he said, "Well, I'm going to rewrite this whole thing. I don't like how it is." And they said, "Well, no, you're not touching the script." And he said, "All right, then I'm not going to direct it then." And then that's when they fired him and then brought in was it
Kleiser?
Kleiser, yeah.
Yeah. Wow, big names of the era.
Yeah.
Before we dive into it, let's check in with Andy. Andy, let's get a quick reaction from you to this movie. Had you seen this before?
I had. I saw this movie in the second grade, but I didn't see it in the theaters. A girl named Kelly in my second grade class brought it in. She had taped it from TV and brought it in, and it was one of those special things where, the teacher rolls in the TV cart, and everybody gets real excited. And I had no idea what it was, and I remember just absolutely loving it. And when I watched it, my wife sat and watched it with me, and I had a blast. I love this movie.
Well, I kind of got that impression earlier when we were doing our introductions that you were on board with this one, and I think while I was researching this and watching interviews about this movie, I was finding so many people with very similar stories like Andy's. There, I was just as a kid just really being fascinated by this movie, and I was one of them too. I mean, that's the way I was. And my weird memory, if you'll indulge me for a second, was we were at church in the children's church time where we'd go to just to get out of the sanctuary, and I'm in this playroom area, and one of the kids was like, "Hey, let's play Fly to the Alligator," is what he kept calling it, Fly to the Alligator. And I remember going, "Dude, come on, it's not Alligator, it's Navigator." But he kept referring to it as Alligator, and he was David, and he was running around, and it was we had this whole reenactment of the movie at the hands of this weird kid in our church, who wanted to call it the Flight of the Alligator. But I remember just really loving this movie as a kid.
And there's I don't know, I think it hit our generation just at the right time. I mean, we were those kids.
Yeah.
I mean, we were David, and we were in between David and Jeff, and so it was just, all the references, all the toys. I mean, jumping ahead to the scene where he's at NASA and he walks in and sees the bed with the toys on it.
Oh yeah.
I remember as a kid seeing that and being jealous, being like, "Oh, I want that. I wish I had that toy. I want that Transformer."
That's right.
And that's so crazy because I put that in my notes. I was like, he walks in, I was like, those toys as a kid just really intrigued me. I was so jealous, but then I'm sitting there saying, but he's being locked in a room.
Right. I wouldn't care. I had this in my notes too, that I was so jealous too. I like me in a room with a bunch of free like Transformers and like NASA swag. I mean, I think you're right. I think it hit us all at like the right. I mean, this is the first movie we've done, I think, that came out during my lifetime. Yeah. I had to think about Freaky Friday, but it's the first movie we've done that came out in my lifetime. Certainly the first one that I remember seeing in the theater. And I'm pretty sure we went to see this twice, which was a big deal, like back in the day. I guess it came out in the summer, and we saw it twice, I think. And it was just, I was roughly, maybe a little younger, roughly the same age as David. And it hit you like right in all the places in your brain, all the right places. So it was a big deal.
Yeah, definitely. And it's the... I mean, things like when Sarah Jessica Parker, who shows up in this movie, when she references Twisted Sister, that was my first. That was my first introduction to Twisted Sister.
Yeah, mine too. Yes.
I mean, there's lots. There's just so many things that this movie. I don't know. It became one of those movies that just pretty much captured my childhood.
Well, let's jump right into it. Let's start off with the beginning of this movie.
So Act 1, I mean, right at the very beginning, I think what I loved about this movie, I mean, as a video professional, and was just the imagery right there at the start. Is just that you see this flying saucer, and I kind of got the impression that everyone knew going into the theater this was an abduction movie, that there was an alien presence in this movie. So I thought this really sets the tone and like creates immediate tension as you see this what appears to be a flying saucer sailing through the air in slow motion, and then a dog grabs this frisbee, and then they set the scene that they're in Florida. I mean,
I thought it was funny. They really telegraphed the like, oh my gosh, it's a spaceship three times.
Yeah,
and like
they really wanted to try to like build this tension out, and then you have the Goodyear blimp going over as well. And then later on in the opening, the first act, you see a water tower that resembles a spaceship. So you know it's coming. You know there's going to be some sort of a spaceship. But I thought they did. I liked how that built a lot of tension early in the movie.
Yeah.
And I also thought it was just funny here in the very beginning, opening credits, is that they clearly get a nice squared up shot of a banner that gives us July the 4th, 1978, South Florida. So they established the time and the place right in the first like 30 seconds of the movie, and then a dog leaps in the air and grabs a frisbee, and then it cuts. So
I love the fake out of like making you think it's a spaceship and then it's a frisbee, and then you get a bunch of dogs like jumping. That's quality content with like all the dogs jumping in the air and like the ones that kind of face plant. And
I was always like jealous of that too. Like, well, man, because my dog was not a frisbee dog, and growing up,
your dog was not a frisbee dog.
So I was always like, God, man, I wish my dog could do stuff like that. That's crazy. But
it was funny to me. I thought as I was watching this, how 1978, which is when this is set, like you said. Back in 1986, 1978 seemed like so long ago in the distant past.
I mean, you were just like, oh God, so like, God, man, 78, like that was before I was born, and and of course you, Michael, were what, maybe one or two,
one years old, so I don't remember it. So it seemed like a million years ago.
Yeah, but there's a nice character development right there at the very beginning, and it's just you see we're introduced to David, the main character. And we're introduced to his little brother Jeff and his family, Helen and Bill. And Jeff and David are just going at it. So this is this tension right there, and dealing with a little brother and the brother who's getting ready to, going through that awkward transition from being a kid to, to being a teen. And I think, I couldn't relate to it because I have an older sister, but we do have two brothers here on the podcast that could probably relate to it as a lot more.
And one of them's named Jeff.
Right.
And one of them's named Jeff.
Which totally weirded me out, about this movie, when I was a kid, because, like I said, I was roughly David's age. And it was so weird to me that the little brother was named Jeff. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's cosmic significance.
But you guys never fought like that. You guys got along great, right?
They were a little harsher, I think, than we ever were.
And it was pretty one-sided. I don't think I was such an initiator of conflict, and
not like that.
A general jerk.
The movie Jeff is a total putz. And he's ragging on their dog, which you would never have done.
That stupid dog. Yeah, you'll never get that dog to catch a frisbee.
He's so stupid. Also, I remember the other funny thing I remember, when they're going through their little back and forth, I remember being slightly scandalized that he calls him butt face. Oh my goodness!
And what's a scuzzbucket? I never got that reference either.
I feel like that's unique to this movie.
Okay, I thought maybe there was something maybe it was a South Florida thing. I didn't, but yeah, I never understood that insult.
They seem to be very fond of it though. But I remember thinking if one of us called each other a butt face, it would have been big trouble.
Oh yeah, it would have been big trouble in our house too. And now, I have two boys myself, and they do fight quite a bit. But there's definitely that. I haven't heard any scuzzbuckets yet. So as dusk falls, David and everyone goes home. Jeff goes and hangs out with some buddies as they're coming home. So as
Can I say I'm really jealous of that. Wherever his pals were on the slip and slide. Out in the woods.
The Spanish moss A-frame.
That A-frame, it was so Lake Buena Vista. It was perfect.
So they asked David to go walk his brother home. So this is, a pretty good sequence here. He's going through the woods. It's more tension. He's got his dog with him. He's talking to the dog. He's dealing with being a teen. He's got this crush on a girl. He's telling the dog that, girls want take charge guys, and I got to be a tough guy, but he's scared to death. So he's trying to psych himself up, try not to be scared because it's dark, it's kind of spooky in the woods. And then we get the water tower as he's coming through. He kind of looks up and it looks like there's another flying saucer coming in, and it's another water tower.
Yeah, the way they do that though. All right, so E.T. came out before this movie, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And Robert knows this. I don't know if Michael and Jeff, if you know this, but I've always hated E.T.
I had no idea.
It scared
can we
me
take a
to death.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, didn't that famously scare you, Michael, in the movie theaters?
Oh, absolutely. I remember two things, and I'll interrupt your story with my scary E.T. things. There were two things I vaguely remember because I was really, really young, and these may be my earliest memories. One was when I was watching Entertainment Tonight, and they were having the big reveal of what E.T. was going to look like. And then they showed him, just a picture. And I could not go to sleep that night. I was so scared. He was in my closet and was coming for me. And then the other, in the opening credits of the movie, when it's dark and it's just E.T. on the screen, you've got the sounds of the forest or whatever.
Yes.
That scared me to death. So,
yeah.
Back to you.
So
Sorry.
that, and when Elliot sees a E.T., I don't remember, is it in a cornfield or a barn or something? They jump when they first encounter each other. Anyways, all that just scared me to death. And so I remember going into this movie with that fear.
Yes.
And so as he's walking through the woods, those memories are coming back. And even now, even when I watched it just the other day, those same feelings, even though they're, I'm a grown man, I still feel that, that tension, that anxiety still comes out. It was crazy.
That is a great call of why, and they actually reference E.T. later in the movie, but that's a great call as to why, because I remember being so creeped out by this too, really, really creeped out by this scene in the woods, and I bet that's totally why, because they're really playing off that E.T. fear.
Yeah, they're definitely. I mean, I put in my notes that the production values here is. I mean, I love the lighting effects they're doing. It's just, you got this light kind of streaming through the trees from the moon, but you're kind of like, is that a spacecraft light? I mean, they're just doing so much here to generate that fear and tension.
And it's really dark. They shot it really. Usually, stuff that's shot at night, it's like day for night or kind of cheesy, but it's like really dark.
They have the giant floodlights in the background. I said it's like pre-X-Files. They have like
totally
huge floodlights.
Yeah,
totally.
Also, wouldn't the woods in Florida at night be full of like?
Yeah, you would not want to be out there. You would not want to be out there. I was thinking that too.
So in this scene, there's like little music cues. It's like the Back to the Future little sprinkles.
Yeah,
right,
and they're doing the same exact thing on that. I mean, it's the same guy.
So Jeff leaps out of the tree there and like scares the bejesus out of poor David, and then like runs off laughing and cackling and just jerk little brother stuff. I mean, I'm a little brother, so I kind of relate.
And David tells him, as David's walking through the woods, he says, "Get back, Jack, I've got a gun."
I wrote that down too. I love that line.
First of all, who's Jack? I mean,
I
guess
didn't
this is just
understand
saying,
that
like,
either.
unless he's like, "Hey, Jack, get out of the way," kind of thing. But I don't know.
I love that. Yeah. There were a couple of lines. There was one where he's talking to the dog about how he doesn't know what he wants out of life. And he says, as a young dog, you might find that hard to understand, which I thought was funny. But then the get back, Jack, because he like yells it out. Get back, Jack, I've got a gun. It's super random. I love that.
So the dog starts barking, and we see, he sees something in this big ravine. And then David falls in and like bangs his head and sort of goes unconscious. And we hear a train going by at that point.
I'm really confused about where this like giant ravine is in Florida.
There aren't very many ravines in Florida. Certainly not in South Florida.
No. He'd like fall into like a lake or a drainage canal or something.
Yeah, it must have been. But so he wakes up, and I mean, I think from an acting standpoint, I think Joey Cramer is like bringing it hard in this whole next sequence. He runs home and he finds out that there's these strange retired couple living in his family's house. He kind of barges in and like breaks down crying in fear. I mean, I'm watching this and I'm like, I feel upset for him.
Yeah. I mean, this was like Twilight Zone for kids.
Yeah, definitely.
And I remember being so freaked out by this because the lady's kind of creepy in a weird way.
The husband's like equally strange. Creepy.
Yeah, he's like Stan Lee, like in a red robe.
He's got like a velvet smoking jacket or silk smoking jacket or something like that.
And he pulls out the sun line.
He runs back. David runs back to his old room, and the old lady's like, "Larry," and he busts in, and Larry like quickly closes whatever he's reading. I guess it was a newspaper, and he stands up and he has that robe. And I wrote my notes. What's Larry been doing?
Yeah. And what's he reading?
He pulls out the whole sun line. Like he goes, "What's wrong, son? Can I help you?" And like, Jeff and I have an affinity for using the word "son" when you're talking down to people.
He's listening to classical music, I thought too.
Yeah. Yes, they're very fancy. I dig that big fish tank that's in the stairway. That house is very Miami aesthetic throughout the movie. Especially in the 70s. That's some good stuff.
I looked that house up, like this was a couple of years ago and I watched this movie, and I looked it up, and man, it's on Zillow, and it ain't cheap. So
really?
The Freemans are doing okay. Like that thing sold for like $2 or $3 million.
Whoa. Well, it's on the water. I remember being jealous of his, well, we didn't really talk about when he's in his room kind of creeping on the girl with the telescope, but I remember being so jealous of his like waterfront view and like his telescope and that whole setup he had there. So it's a good location.
So he goes to the police station, and the police are trying to figure it out, and they have this printout. It's sort of a big pivotal moment in the whole putting this whole puzzle together, as they realize that David disappeared when he was 12 in a blue polo shirt with stripes, and here's this 12-year-old saying he's David Freeman in a blue polo shirt and stripes. And it's just Twilight Zone, like big time here. And I didn't understand.
Real affable cop.
Yeah, the cop was. yeah, seemed like a pretty nice guy. I mean,
You're gonna figure this thing out.
Hey, kid, want some coffee?
in that sweet Dixie cup. Yeah, that's getting in the weeds, but I was real happy to see that Dixie cup.
So I didn't understand why they decided to drive to his parents' house. It seems like they would maybe want the parents to come down there, or at least call them and say, "Hey, we got a few questions for you," but they decided to hop in the car and drive to his family's house, and as they knock on the door, David sees a man come to the door, sort of in silhouette. It looks like his dad, and he realizes it is his dad. He jumps out, and his dad steps out of the shadows, and he looks like he's aged 20 years instead of 8 years.
Yeah, those parents look awful.
Well, imagine the trauma that you would face after losing your child. Maybe that adds an extra 10 years.
All right.
Well, they've got like Veronica Cartwright's hair pulled back into the most extreme pullback ever. And I remember, and they like go in close on her face, and I remember being totally freaked out by that.
And she laughed.
And then later they like take it back a notch. It's
like
her hair is not as far pulled back.
So maybe she was getting ready for bed or something. I don't know. But I saw an interview with Veronica Cartwright, and she was saying that they hired her and David, or was that probably Cliff DeYoung. They hired her and Cliff because they felt like they could age them. They really wanted to age them a lot more than normal would, because they wanted to really see that transition. And she kind of laughed like we are now that she thought they went a little too far. But then she also, said that, hey, maybe they've had a tough time dealing with the loss of their kid. But she sort of laughs. But they also had another son. It's not like, they had nothing. But it was kind of heartless, but kind of funny at the same time that she made that comment. But so, yeah, it's kind of it's a really powerful scene as they're all trying to figure this out. And,
he just passes out, basically.
Yeah, he just sort of blacks out. And so at the same time, but before we go further, there was a little moment at the police station where over David's shoulder is a TV, and it mentions that there's been blackouts all through Fort Lauderdale. And so it's sort of, laying the foundation for the next part of the movie here. And we find out that this weird spacecraft has crashed into all these high-tension wires near a power plant. And then we're introduced for the first time to Dr. Louis Faraday.
The great Howard Hesseman.
Yeah,
Johnny Fever.
Hesseman. Yes.
Johnny Fever. And see, a lot of people know him as Johnny Fever. See, to me, he was always the teacher and head of the class. Yeah,
totally. Same.
And also, he was also in Police Academy. What was his name in Police Academy? I cannot remember. But yeah, he was Lassard.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, well, he wasn't. Well, he was Lassard's like.
No, he was Commander Lassard in the second and third police academies. Anyways,
all right.
He's great.
He's great.
I like how they didn't reveal the ship. Like they sort of kept giving sort of glimpses of it as they're panning around, and then finally, this weird night watchman goes, "Hey, you want to move this thing? It ain't no problem." And he just runs up and just shoves it, and it goes sailing across the ground.
Yeah, I just thought it was funny that it said NASA security.
Yeah,
that's like some major branch of some secretive military.
I had in my notes, and this is something that
NASA's got some secrets
throughout the entire movie. Is like NASA's like the X-Files in this,
right?
Like NASA's like kind of like the FBI and the CIA and the X-Files all rolled into
covert
one
ops
somehow. Yeah,
but it's like, did they have to get NASA's permission to use their logo?
They definitely do. Yeah, I mean, I don't think they're.
So isn't that a weird thing for NASA to sign up for?
I wondered that too.
I kept wondering that myself because I remember reading about the Crimson Tide, the movie about the submarine, and how the U.S. Navy was like, "No, we don't like this movie. We're not going to sign off on it. You can't say that you're part of the U.S. Navy. You can be a submarine, but you're not. We're not going to let you use our subs and use anything that says that you're the U.S. Navy." And so I was using that as a reference and going, NASA, they're painting the picture of NASA sort of being like you said, the X-Files here, but I guess it was the 80s. They had such a big budget. They were just, kind of, rolling in it. And like, there's no bad publicity.
Weird that like it's, as an adult, you see the things that they do as like kind of tone deaf, but like reasonable. Like it's, the way that they treat him and the things that they do. It's like, okay, that's probably what you would do. But like as a kid, it's just like, these people are monsters. And it's just weird for NASA to be like, yes, this is great. It makes us look like we're like them out to get you.
So the next scene, we see David's hospitalized now, and we're introduced to 16-year-old Jeff. And
who they introduce as Jeffrey, which
that
as a Jeff I always found very interesting.
Sore spot.
And again,
but then also then later he's called Jeff again. So anyway, that's just some Jeff trivia for you.
And his outfit,
I used to think that he was, I used to think this was the benchmark of coolness. He had the Jam shirt on, the sleeves rolled up. He had the kind of like shaved, high and tight 80s version, glasses. Looked real cool.
But I think
like saying, be cool, dude.
Like how they shot this, though, again, they used the silhouette setup where you see this older gentleman standing in the shadows, and David's like trying to grasp the fact that his brother's older than him now, his younger brother, and there's this sort of back and forth, and he doesn't believe him at first. He's like, you can't be my brother, and then they start doing they start calling each other names again, and Scuzzbucket comes up again.
Yeah. They say it at the same time because it's such a touch point.
And then Jeff pulls out this flyer and sort of like talks about the missing child flyer, and how he felt horrible about scaring him that night, and he'd been putting up these flyers this whole time, and sort of this sort of like really connection here, and it's pretty touching to see them sort of like come together again and over this, and David like confides in Jeff, and he's like comforting him. His little brother is, and telling him, hey, it's going to be all right. We're going to figure this out. Don't worry about it. And I really liked that scene. I thought it really, really played well.
Yeah, especially since David is just so super freaked out throughout these early scenes of the movie. I mean, he's pretty much under stress throughout.
So back at NASA, they're moving this craft now. They've got it up on an 18-wheeler, sort of floating along with the 18-wheeler, and which was kind of weird and kind of cool. And I can only assume they're going to the Kennedy Space Center. I mean, that's the only NASA facility in Florida, if I'm not mistaken.
They never really say where it is.
Yeah, they never say where it is, but
they got that sweet bicentennial logo on the truck.
So they stick this craft, this floating, like it looks like what would you call it, like a kidney bean or a walnut is into this weird hangar. And I felt like even like in this moment, I thought the hangar was like loosely guarded. Like
yes, totally. For like an alien spacecraft that has just appeared.
When they first see it, they're like, "This could be first contact." It's like, yeah, it could be.
I think you're
definitely
right.
Definitely a UFO.
So David begins to have nightmares at the same time as all this is sort of unfolding at NASA, and like he keeps hearing voices in his head, and like. And so somebody needs help, and he shoots awake, and Jeff and him Jeff's sitting by his bed like reading a book
with the itty bitty book light.
With an itty bitty book light.
Which
Yep.
So they start doing some tests on David at this point, and he manages to like communicate with the computer at the hospital with his brain, which I thought was.
Yeah, they say David is communicating directly with the computer in binary code.
That's right.
Yeah, so good. You know how like when you watch a movie, like everything in this movie, like I haven't seen it in a long, long time, but like everything, like it was like total recall, like complete instant recall of like everything that happened. But there are lines like when you see a movie like as a kid that gets stuck in your brain forever, and just the way they're like read. One of the ones is when they're like, how is he doing that? And this guy, it's a great read. The guy goes, I have no idea. I don't know why that's so funny to me. Because everybody's kind of freaking out. Like, why is this happening? How's he doing that? I have no idea.
So they're at the hospital now, and it's just the regular old Joe Schmo doctor there on call, and he's like, they put these little probes with like cotton balls all over his head, which and then that's when he starts like communicating with the computers. It takes control of the screen, and you see the spacecraft sort of pops up in this sort of what would you call it, like an 8-bit,
like a
wireframe model, and
that would make a cool screensaver, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would. Oh man.
So right then, like you see the ship, and like the music rises and the tension builds, and then it cuts to this big plotter, and it's printing it out, and they rip it off the plotter and hand it to Dr. Faraday, and he holds it up and he says, what's this? He says that came out of the mind of an 8-year-old or 12-year-old boy, and then he looks and you see the reflection, you see the exact same ship sitting there, and then so it's
how did they know? I mean, how did they get that to him though?
I wondered that too.
The hospital. Why did they say, okay, let's send this over to Faraday's office? I mean,
it seems maybe it's a coincidence. Maybe they said, hey, let's go send this to NASA. Maybe they know something about it. And
nah.
I had so many questions about how it was transmitted to their like giant plotter printer, and
right.
Did they email it over? How'd they do that?
David sent it with his brain.
It'd be funny if it just like his brain just automatically.
Yeah, his brain did it. Yeah, that's right.
They had a modem where they had to take the handset off and stick it on the thing.
Put the thing in the coupler. Yeah.
Yep. Be a 2800 baud.
and that like plot comes one line like every every 2 seconds. Oh, what's it gonna be? I don't know. They come back the next morning. Oh, it's a spaceship
that came from the mind of a 12-year-old.
Very slowly.
And that wraps up Act 1. We have our call to action. We have this sort of journey between the spaceship and David like coming together, and now Faraday knows that there's a kid out there with this ship in his head. Okay, so Act 2 begins with Faraday. He sort of approached the family, and it's this sort of like, we sort of see Faraday kind of, his true colors kind of coming out. Like he's being kind of manipulative here, and he's trying to like, not be like, you need to go, but he's like, don't you want to know the truth? And he's like trying to, kind of pull at their heartstrings a little bit. And
yeah, this was all weird to me because, like, for one thing, what Faraday's like actually trying to do makes perfect sense, and is totally what you would think somebody should absolutely do if a kid disappears and a spaceship appears and like all this stuff is going on. Like, you should want to look into it. But he plays it so sinister, and his parents are like, David's parents are like weirdly hostile towards NASA. They're like, oh, we're going home. And Jeff is like, yeah, suck it, man. Egghead. Yeah, it's such a weird like response to something that is like, yeah, you would probably want to get to the bottom of this.
Yeah.
And I put my notes about the music here, Jeff. So there's like all these swells, kind of like you were saying earlier.
Yeah, this is like really spooky music. It's great though. I mean, it's this music I just automatically remember when I think about the movie. It's just really cool synth stuff.
So they're setting up Faraday, I guess, as the villain.
Yeah, he's the antagonist here.
Yeah, but I mean, as a kid, were you ever afraid of Faraday? I mean, was it that kind of villain to you guys, or was it more of, he's trying to do something cool with the Navigator stuff? But I mean, for me personally, I never saw Faraday as a villain. It was just more of the authority, adult, grown-up figure.
I saw her more as an authority figure, maybe not as a villain. As sort of this kind of like your school principal. I mean,
Yeah.
like I never hated my school principal, but I never had, I always kind of feared him and thought, what's going on here?
Yeah, it's just a weird thing, like watching him as an adult, because there's nothing he does that, like, he's got really bad bedside manner.
Yeah,
but there's
Terrible.
nothing he does that is bad, but just the way that he does it makes you feel like he's like sinister or something, even though he doesn't actually do anything bad at all.
Right.
It's really weird. But I remember, I'm trying to think of how I felt about it as a kid, but it's definitely like you want David to get out of there, even though, like, as an adult, you're like, no, you should stay where you are.
So he arrives at the base and like immediately starts hearing the voices that he's been hearing again, and they're getting louder now. And he like immediately like is drawn to this hangar, which is like out in the middle of nowhere. Like again, the whole security around the hangar cracks me up. But so he finds himself in this like 24-hour tiny surveillance room with loads of toys, and we talked about this earlier.
Yeah.
And like I said it always confused me as a kid, and because I was like way impressed and didn't understand why is he not happy about this.
Right.
Right.
I mean, you got Transformers and G.I. Joe and all the NASA stuff. You've got Sarah Jessica Parker bringing you like
yeah, you got
McDonald's.
Sarah Jessica Parker bringing you
with a
horse
robot.
With a robot. Like, how could you not be like totally stoked to be there?
Let's talk about the robot for a second, because the robot's name is Ralph, which stands for Robotic Assistance and Labor Facilitator. I mean, it just feels like a really bad acronym.
Yeah, you're working real hard on that.
So, yeah, somebody spent too much time trying to figure that one out.
Also, Ralph makes me think of just like vomiting.
Yeah, and Ralph is just like reeks of like 1980s robot.
Yeah. Right.
But yeah, I was envious of that robot. I thought that robot was sweet.
And I also I love how they made a big point, like there's like this really tight close-up of the word Ralph on the chassis of the robot, with Sarah Jessica Parker pointing at the letters as she talks about it. It just felt like just a useless cutaway. But
yeah, that was funny.
They really wanted everyone to see that. So I
was really psyched to see he had a copy of the Space Shuttle Owner's Manual. Which
really, I didn't notice.
I also had. It was sitting by the TV, which I also had and still do have. And Jeff and I would stay up at night after bedtime and read the checklist to like have space shuttle launches using that exact same book. So I was stoked to see that.
Sarah Jessica Parker, I had seen her. She was also in a movie called Girls Just Want to Have Fun. And I had an older sister who'd seen these movies, and so I had already developed a crush on her by this point. And so when she showed up in this movie, I was like, all right, I was already in love with her.
So we introduced like the 80s like pop culture in this scene too. And
yeah, this is good stuff.
Like he turns on MTV and he's like, "What in the world is this?" And I can't remember the name of the band now. I looked it up.
Recently. It was Blancmange.
That's it. Yes, and they're like,
which I've never heard of. But that
I think
video
it's made up, right?
Great.
No, it's for real. They're a real band. Yeah, I mean, you can.
They were in the credit. It was in the credits, is where I saw it.
And then we find out that Sarah Jessica Parker has been going, or pardon me, Carolyn McAdams has been going to see Twisted Sister, and
she's got her pink little hair floof.
And I never understood that reference. Like, why does she have? Because I mean, I never heard of Twisted Sister at that point as a kid. And then I kept thinking, why is colored hair have to do with Twisted Sister? Until obviously I found out later in life. Why.
But I'm going to echo what Andy said and say that the thirst for Sarah Jessica Parker was real at the time of this, which is ironic considering how I feel about her in my old age and the things that she's done since. But at the time, this was a very iconic role. And it's funny, like in doing the research, I came across an article that she did with the AV Club where they were asking her about like past roles, and they asked her about this, and she just kind of made fun of it and was like, I did it for the paycheck. Like she didn't even remember what the role was or even like anything about it.
No, come on.
If you only knew how iconic this was, I mean, come on. This is an iconic role for a certain generation.
Well, Joey Cramer was talking in an interview about meeting her, and he said that he had a huge crush on her, and that whole scene where like she tells him that he's she thinks he's cute.
Yeah.
He was like, yeah, I was eating it up.
Oh man, no kidding. That he speaks for a generation, because that was that was a key scene.
You know, it's strange. Something I noticed watching it now as an adult was her character would have been the same age as David would have been at that point.
That's what I always thought.
Whoa.
And I never got that until this time. So I was like, oh, I wonder why. I mean, there's this kind of connection there between the two of them. I mean, it's weird because first of all, she calls him weird, but then later, you know, which is a terrible thing to do. And also, why is she working at a maximum security NASA security place?
Yeah, I put that in my notes too. That she certainly has a lot of access to a maximum security section.
Why do they? Yeah, and they have like blast doors from Star Wars.
Yeah, I love the sound effect when the blast door closes. Yeah. I had this in my notes too. I said, how many people does NASA have on lockdown to necessitate having Carolyn and Ralph going around with like the cafeteria tray? Like, what even is this facility?
That was weird. I was wondering that myself. Like, you know, is this like where they keep all the secrets?
Yeah,
there's a prequel idea right here that we're talking about.
I want to know who is in all these other rooms that she's bringing lunch to. Like, the room that he's in is like, it is kind of like the Enterprise or something. Yes. But it's kind of like a room. Like, one time I had to do a sleep study, and so you go to the hospital where they have these like fake bedrooms, kind of, and that's what this reminded me of. You got the guys on the other side of the mirror, and it's really kind of weird. But yeah, is NASA prepared to do whatever kind of research they're doing in this facility, whatever it is?
So yeah, Sarah Jessica Parker's going around like having like all this, like fixing all these problems for all these inmates, you know, at this facility.
Totally.
Like there's like this whole backstory going on behind the scenes where she's, you know, helping everybody out and being a mole.
There were a couple of funny things that always stuck in my memory about this, and one is when he turns on the TV and is wanting to see where Starsky and Hutch is on. He's like, what channel, or what, you know, why is it Starsky and Hutch on TV? I thought that was funny. And also, I swear the line that she has about all the different kinds of Cokes, I think that had to have been in an ad or something, because I remember that so, like in a commercial or something, because that was like one of those iconic lines where she goes down the list of all the different types of Coke there are now in the future.
So the next day, we flash forward, and he's on the phone with his parents, and before we see that Bruiser, the family dog, is catching a frisbee now, which is kind of a nice moment that Jeff like felt bad about saying that stupid dog's never going to catch a frisbee after his brother disappeared, and teaches the dog how to be a champion frisbee catcher. So it was kind of a nice little. That was a
nice touch, and they don't even like call it out or anything. It's just it kind of just is there.
So yeah, during the phone call, the questions of David getting to go home is brought up, and Faraday, you know, is kind of like ducking it a little bit even here, as I recall.
Yeah, and go ahead.
I was going to say, they're talking about, you know, the amount of time that they're going to think David's going to need to stay, but you can tell that Faraday's got other ideas.
Yeah, like he threw the 48 hours out just to get him on the hook. It was kind of how I interpreted it.
Yeah, and I remember being obsessed with his like Apollo pencil sharpener.
Oh yeah,
right.
And really cool. Also being scandalized because Jeff drops the S-bomb on the phone.
Right, which there's like a couple of moments that get them a PG rating. It seems like just showboating. It's like,
yeah, totally.
What's the point of that?
And he yells it, and his parents don't even say anything to him. He just screams it out loud, and the parents don't even say
parents, man. Yeah,
yeah. I remember Jeff, being like so.
I mean, Jeff is just so cool. I mean,
Jeff is the man.
He gets away with it because he's cool.
So now they start doing the testing, and this is really an amazing scene right here. And so they hook David up to this computer, and they have to quote unquote sync the computer to his brain.
It's kind of the same setup as Lewis in Ghostbusters when they find Gozer and his like brain waves. Yeah, it's pretty much the same setup.
So then the computer can read his mind without him having to say anything. So it's like they were like accessing a computer database now instead of like a human. So it's very '80s to me, and I put in my notes here. Man, NASA in the '80s, their budgets must have been really good to have this kind of hardware. So
they've got this whole setup and can like totally read your mind.
And I like, why is he in the room? Like, why did they like put him into like a room on a couch and try to make him comfortable instead of sticking him in the room with all the computers? Of course, they do it so that he can get mad and storm out and see what's his brain is thinking. But it just seemed like bad bedside.
Yeah, well, this goes to what Jeff was saying earlier about Dr. Faraday. It's like he's really bad at like. He's like not talking to David. He's talking about David and at David. It's like, just chill out, man.
Nobody's explaining what's going on, and he's just saying, "What's going on?" They're like, "Next question, next question,"
like snapping fingers and
it's
yelling.
Like there's no time. Like you can explain it to him and then ask the question.
Yeah. I put how dismissive and callous Faraday is in this scene. It's just so
super
annoying.
Callous.
Yeah, so.
Super callous.
But the computer reveals that David has traveled 560 light years from Phalon. And he did it. And what got me was, how would David even know this information? I guess it's the idea that the spaceship backed up its entire system into his head. Is that what we're made to believe?
That's right.
Okay. Yeah, they backed
so
up.
He's gone.
Well, yeah, it's funny because it's like David doesn't know anything, but the stuff that's in his brain does. So it's kind of like ratting him out.
So he's like, how would I know that? And he says, and then immediately it says 560 light years, the equivalent, and they traveled it into the equivalent of 2.2 Earth hours.
And this guy,
some nerd in the back, goes, light speed theory.
Great line.
And I put in my notes there, so you'd think they would have maybe called up Ronald Reagan at this point and kind of given him a briefing that that they've had this huge breakthrough. But,
well, that sounds.
Somebody
really
call Ronnie.
Nancy. You'll never believe
what they have down at NASA. The boys at NASA have.
That sounds like quite a story.
Well,
that nice young man.
So the next scene here, we got Carolyn comes coming in with Ralph, and I put again like she has a lot of information for a robot babysitting NASA intern.
I noticed the same thing.
In my notes, I said Carolyn not great on the operational security.
Yes,
no,
or the Disney look. She's
no.
I wonder if she was like someone at NASA's like daughter or something, or like oh, my neighbor works at NASA. They got me this job. And I just go in.
Maybe
and take
she
food
doesn't.
Around.
Yeah, she's not usually working the top security NASA abduction chamber.
But the reason, like we're saying all this, because she lets David know that, hey, you're not going home tomorrow. Like,
which is
you're on the list for next week, and that means you're going to be here for a long time. And like he like blows his cork, and then
you would think security, which is on the other side of that glass, would have stepped in at that point, but like, hey, get out of here.
Oh, yeah,
like,
for real.
You're like reading like Jughead and Archie comics or something.
Yeah. They're playing cards or something.
I love when he's banging on the mirror. He says, "Do you think I don't watch television? Wake up!"
That's right. I was putting my notes here. Like, well, David convinces Carolyn to go to his parents and let them know that he's not coming home. And I put, maximum security indeed. Come on.
Yeah, really. Does she do this for all the other people that got locked up? Or is it just David?
But I mean, yeah.
What?
The nefarious side of NASA. It's like, what? Like, do they have a lot of people locked up?
It does make you think that. But this is when that's when the line comes out though that she tells David that he's cute.
Yeah. She tells him here, and
yeah,
like I said, I love that interview today with Joey Cramer, and he was just like, man, I wasn't acting there. I was like genuine awe.
Well, I had thought, like what Andy said about them, like in real world terms being the same age because he had skipped all this time. I thought about that when I was a kid, and I was like, man, like in my head, I had the sequel where he'd go like find her because they'd be like roughly the same age, and it would be all right now because
cool.
He
goes to a Twisted Sister show and he sees her,
and bumps into her.
Yeah.
So David wakes up the next late that night or early that morning, I guess is more what it is, and he hears more voices, and then Ralph comes, bumbling into his room, and we find out why there was an 80s robot in this movie. And,
but let me say that I was always vaguely uncomfortable by him sleeping without his shirt in his jeans. I don't know why I thought that was so odd. I was like, put on a shirt, man. There are people.
Well, also take off the jeans.
Take off the jeans. Yeah.
I guess he just had a rough night. He just wanted to crash. I mean, I don't know. Kind of like Marty McFly sleeping in his clothes.
Yeah, it's kind of like heroin chic, sleeping without a shirt in your jeans somewhere. Like no, man. People are watching.
So he climbs in the Ralph, which is conveniently big enough to put a small 12-year-old boy in, and the Ralph music montage is really top notch.
Yes. It's a high point. It's a high point of the movie.
I mean, that is
they're really
80s
moving
music.
along.
Yeah, that's 80s, 80s, 80s.
You have all this,
and there's a lot of great encounters with law enforcement.
Yes,
a lot of Ralph going by and
who do nothing.
By.
Yeah, they're all just sort of sitting there, like milling around, like just leaning up against their security cars and
way to go, NASA.
Yeah, their Crown Vics and stuff.
Yeah. Hey, there goes the dinner robot. What's it doing out here?
You have the dog starts barking. He's like, "Hey, we'll get you your own breakfast. Come on."
Yeah. Isn't that big fire truck that it keeps playing it up like, oh, he's going to run into something and it'll turn, and then like a fire truck comes up behind him.
I loved that fire truck as a kid. I always
big old fire truck.
Well, it's a nice contrast because you see this enormous like airport fire truck and this little tiny robot, and then like you said, you think it's going to run over the robot, then it peels off, but yeah, it's
Ralph knows where he's going.
Yeah, Ralph knows what's up. Or does Ralph know where he's going? Or is it that the spacecraft is telling Ralph where to go?
See, that's what I always thought as a kid.
Oh, yeah.
Was
that's
that
what's happening.
The spacecraft was telling Ralph where
and
to
I also
go.
does Ralph just get to go wherever he wants?
Apparently Ralph has complete security clearance to everything.
Ralph has, this 80s robot has complete security clearance. That's right.
He's just filled with Big Macs.
Gotta go take the Big Macs down to the secret hangar.
As a kid, I think I thought that Carolyn had sent him. And
Yeah.
I was trying to remember, but I swear I remember.
I did too, because
that.
she punches in those numbers earlier.
Yeah.
When he's leaving. But I think, I thought watching it again that the spaceship.
Yeah,
spaceship, because you hear like the gargled voice saying, "Get in the Ralph unit," is what the gargled voice says.
Which is an awesome moment.
Get in
the Ralph unit.
So David enters the hangar and he hops out of Ralph, and he sees this strange craft, and he's finally united with this, this thing that's been communicating with him, and it's kind of a cool moment. And the steps are down. Before they pointed out that it's just sort of this big seamless metal ball, and but now like there's this door with these like hovering steps. Now it's kind of cool.
No security.
And absolutely no security inside the hangar.
No security inside the
couple
barn.
of lackeys inside in a control room, which we'll get to in a second.
I love how they shoot the stairs because, it's a practical thing. However, they've got whatever's supporting the stairs out of view. But it looks like, as a kid, though, it was like, how did they do that? It's magical.
Yeah, I never understood it either. I always thought I tried to figure that out as a kid. This is where I made some comment about James Cameron, because we see the sort of the liquid metal of the door coming down and the steps coming down, and I thought this really must have inspired Cameron. And at the time, I didn't know that he was been approached to direct this movie, so it was kind of, my jaw kind of hit the ground when I found that out today. But
yeah, as a kid seeing that, I just remember thinking that was just so futuristic.
Yeah,
it was just like something we'd never seen anything like that, and I was just like blown away.
Yeah, totally.
So David enters the spacecraft here. It's all chromed out. So, like, what are your thoughts here on the set design?
I thought it looked like the where they dock in Independence Day.
Yes.
On the alien spaceship.
Oh, yeah.
It was like 10 years ahead of its time. I thought the set design is incredible. I mean, there's like a cool shot of him walking, looking down at the floor, and you see it in the reflection of the floor, where it's just featureless, and then all the stuff comes out of the walls later, and it's just pretty neat.
It's really cool how it's like especially in the era of Transformers, the fact that this thing, not only does the outside shape change later, but like the seat rises out of the floor, and like the engines and things move around, and it's really cool.
So Joey Cramer said that they shot all the interiors. This is where they went to Norway. That they boxed this, they built the set, and then they shipped it to Norway.
It looked chilly.
And shot it in Norway. And he said he was trying to explain it, in the interview, that they had like this sort of like translucent plastic that when it was the way it was lit, like you could see through it, and at times, and then they could light it so it looked like a big silver shell. But
I love this effect because they do it I'd wondered how they did it. Because they do it a couple of times later where Max is like interfacing with the ship and they've got fiber optics, just like little bundles of fiber optics like behind the wall, and you can see them through the wall. So I figured it was something like that, but I didn't know exactly what. So it's interesting to hear that is how they did it, because it's it's like you can see the lights through the wall and it's a cool little swirly effect.
And they did also have a projection, they were actually shooting a video projection, rear projection back into the ship.
Wow.
So, it looked
so they didn't comp that in or anything. That's cool.
Yeah. So he said that so they could interact with the scenes as they were. So I thought that was kind of cool. But so he confronts this strange robot eyeball right here, and it sort of like opens up, and it's kind of creepy and sort of floats out of the wall.
I think the original, when it first opens, its eye is such a cool effect, like a kaleidoscopic, really beautiful effect.
I feel like this was really deliberate to make this alien like robotic. Like they didn't want it to be like scary, grotesque, or be like a Wookiee or something like that. They wanted it to be, be kind of computer and robotic, and I feel like that was a real deliberate choice to make it more kid friendly. To me, that's what that was kind of how I. When I was watching it, going, this was real deliberate. I mean, the easy thing would have been to do would just have a, some sort of weirdo alien, inside the ship. But
like some zany alien kind of deal.
Yeah, but to have a sort of this eyeball was really unique and cool. I really liked it.
It kind of reminded me of in Return of the Jedi when they go to Jabba the Hutt's lair.
Yes,
the eye that comes out of the door.
Yes,
I mean,
totally.
Something had some similarities there.
So security finally does something because they look up from their magazines that they're sitting there reading, and they see that the door's open on the ship, and they immediately pull out this checklist, which I thought was kind of funny.
Oh, that was good. Like they put on the radiation suits and everything. It's like, what do we do? But what cracks me up is that, okay, there's no security except these two guys who aren't paying attention. But then like 5,000 dudes with like AK-47 show up. Yeah. Like, where were you?
Right.
And why does NASA have so many guns?
I also pointed out there's no women here. Like NASA is like 99% male, if not 100% male in the 1980s.
Right.
Yeah, but Jeff, you were about to say the amount of guns that they have aimed at David was just ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's like the Blues Brothers. The end of the Blues Brothers.
And, there's like clearly no weight to some of them. I mean, I thought that was really amusing. They have like these AK-47s that look like they're made out of plastic because the guys are just like flailing them around. And there's all these noises of like, people.
Hut, 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 hut.
The M16s, that's what they are. That was the gun.
Oh, yeah, M16s, yeah.
So I thought there was some solid acting here as the ship's kind of like leaving from Joey Cramer. I put my notes. Hey, it's not Haley Joel Osment good, but it's pretty good. He's holding his own here. And
yeah.
So after
my favorite acting moment when they're pulling out was that one guy who stands below the spaceship and looks up at it, which like everybody else is running away and he's just like staring.
Yeah, that's right. Like,
with like the wind blowing on him. Yeah.
Yeah.
Always that guy. Yeah.
So the spaceship takes everything pretty literal, and there's some communication failures here in the next couple of scenes. They shoot 20 miles straight up in the air, and I think what's funny was like they just take off, and then Faraday was like, "Let's get the tracking," and they all took off and run off.
Yeah.
He says it went straight up at Mach 10, which just cracks me up because at Mach 10 his face would have peeled off.
Right.
I figure there had to be some sort of like Starship Enterprise like compensation thing going on there because he would have been jelly.
Sorry, I should have suspended my belief. Yeah.
No, but I'm saying I thought the same thing though. I thought the same thing that like he would have been like totally jelly the way that they go from like 0 to 1 million all the time.
Oh, this was interesting here because in the interview with Joey Cramer today, that he said that they tried to like have these like wires or plastic things they could pull his face back with.
Ooh.
And they wanted to like flatten his face out, and they tried it over and over again. They tried like putting like these prosthetics on and stuff, and they said it just looked really creepy and bad. So they told him to make a face like and I was like, he's like, it was a good choice not to do that. He looked really creepy.
Yeah, that would have been disturbing. Jeez.
So he comes back, and then he says, if that's a 5th or 6th class maneuver, what's a 1st class maneuver? And then that's when the CGI really like cranks up.
Yeah.
And the ship turns into what would you call it?
It's like the sports car version of
the teardrop shape. Version, yeah, teardrop. That's what I was trying to think. And it takes off at through the swamps of Florida, and just like it kind of reminded me of some of those Epcot movies they used to do. I guess they still do, but
it reminded me that now that you say that, I didn't think of this when I was watching, but like in the end of like World of Motion, going deep into Epcot more.
Yeah.
Like when it'd be like, you're going down like a bobsled thing, or you're at like a speed room, where they'd project like you were going real fast. That's what it was like.
So there's a point here where as they're sailing over the swamps that the spacecraft, which gets named later, is like throwing out all these like braggadocious facts about himself. Like he can go at any speed, he can speak thousands of languages and do all this amazing stuff. And I guess they needed to put this in to like drive the plot a little bit, that that this is this high tech super machine. But I mean, it felt kind of forced to me. But what were your thoughts?
To me, it felt like Max was like a C-3PO's annoying brother.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because it's Pee Wee Herman, but Pee Wee Herman doing a super serious voice.
Yeah.
So it's
and
like you're not used to
tuned down, like his voice is modulated like down at the beginning of the movie.
Yeah. It was when I looked up a trailer for this because like the thing I was saying about the lines that stick in your head. There's one where they're scanning his brain, and this guy goes, "He's searching through star charts." And I remember that was in like every commercial, that line. So I was trying to find a trailer, and I didn't find that, but I found one, and they had dubbed, like the voice they had for Max, the robot, was completely different. It was this very serious, "You are the Navigator." And it would have been a very different movie with this like really imposing, like serious voice, and instead of like modulated Pee-wee.
So they're flying over. David starts to kind of finally relax and is like taking grasp of the situation, and they end up in a cow pasture, and he decides he needs to go out and take a leak, and this craft is demanding that he scan his brain and get the information he needs back out, and so he can restore his databases. And sort of a climax is here where they're arguing about David wants to go home, the ship wants the information, and NASA's showing up now with helicopters, and so there's this agreement that that in exchange for the information, the ship will take David home, and that wraps up Act 2 right there, sort of our climax here.
There's a fun thing that they do, like every time the ship takes off, they have a little effect. When it took off from NASA, they blow the roof off of like a security booth or something.
Yes,
which is a really great effect. I love that. And then in the cow pasture, they do something off screen to make the cows stampede.
Yeah, the cows all scatter.
Yeah,
when
really
the
cool.
thing takes off, it's a really nice like little added little effect that the ship spooks the cows when the ship isn't even there.
Maverick.
Or
they also say when he stops in the cow pasture that his brain leaked, and that's why he, what the problem was with his brain is it just leaked.
Yeah,
it was like okay, but yeah, they really explaining what happened there. It's like some good exposition there.
Yeah, while he's peeing on an orange tree.
Yeah, it's like the longest pee.
Act 3 begins, and Carolyn once again is in the center of like all this trouble at NASA. It's eavesdropping on Faraday as he's trying to assess the situation, and so, like I said, if there's a weak link in this whole movie, it's the security around Carolyn is just ridiculous.
I love how they say later that like she's an intern.
Yeah,
you're gonna let an intern talk to your like alien abductee. Come on, guys.
So back on the ship, the craft has revealed that he's on a mission to study life on other planets. They've decided to fill a human brain all the way up, see what happens, and then his brain leaked, is what he says. So, and as luck would have it,
up with like navigational charts and stuff.
Navigational charts, yeah. So as luck would have it, David has a carbon copy of all the information he lost. So just think what would have happened if he hadn't, tried to fill David's brain up. He'd have been stuck. So
yeah, they get the background of how the ship, who he calls Max, he's a Trimaxian drone ship.
Yeah, so that's what. Yeah, they're flying out away from the cow pasture. He mentions that. So.
Yeah, and so he apparently was looking at daisies when he ran into some power lines and scrambled his navigational circuitry. So that's why he needs David to to retrieve that info.
So now they're sailing over the ocean now at this point, and I put my notes here that, this is like where the special effects really kind of crank it up because they have all that reflection. They're doing the reflective, rendering here. That's for 1986,
it's really good.
That's nothing to sneeze at. Yeah.
Photo real.
Of course, I was watching it with the interview with the director of the day, and he's talking about how that we can do that with our cell phones now. But and they had to rent this big Cray computer, and it took them like a month just to render like one effect.
It's wild.
So yeah, it's pretty crazy. Yeah. So Max opens up this secret compartment and with all these like creatures, and I could have swore that Jim Henson was connected to this movie, but I couldn't find any evidence that he was. But it's all these puppets and crazy stuff here.
Yeah, in my memory, they're totally like Muppet creatures, but apparently there's no connection. But it is very Muppet adjacent for sure.
And even like,
did you all notice that one was from the Pixar elliptic?
No.
Yes.
That was a nice little drop there.
Yeah, and these things, it's funny watching it now. These things are only really briefly in the movie, but like in my memory, they were a huge part of the movie.
Yeah,
right,
definitely. Especially the one that they said it has a cold.
Yes,
that one just stuck in my brain for sure.
Yeah,
they only show him once for like one shot, but that is the thing that I remember about this movie is that guy.
And the big eyeball. That was the other thing.
Yes.
That went...
It was such a weird, like, giggly laugh and ay.
Oh, this is interesting. Right. Like, I found this out today, that this scene when the monster grabs his hat and eats it, the belch at the end was actually recorded by Joey Cramer. He recorded that belch.
Oh, wow.
He was really proud of himself. I really thought I can relate to Joey Cramer now. Like
I would demand a credit for that at least.
That's something that 12-year-old Robert would have definitely lined up to do as well. So
true, very true.
So we also at this point we get the Puckmarin, I think is how it's pronounced. Is that right?
I believe it's pronounced Babu Frick.
Ugh. Don't even bring that in.
Accurate. Very accurate.
That's just, it's kept on being like, oh, it's Babu Frick.
I would describe it as sort of as like a bat without wings. That's kind of what it looks like. But
yeah,
it's sort of
just little chains from his little feet.
Playing with what look like radishes or something.
Yeah, little happy dude.
Yeah. So here we are. We have sort of the Wee Herman moment here. It begins as David is laughing as he's playing with this thing, and Max wants to know what laughter is, and and then we get the iconic Pee Wee Herman laugh.
Yeah. If you weren't sure it was Pee Wee before, you are now.
And it always confused me as a kid because I was like, that's Pee Wee Herman. And then I look in the credits and it's Paul Mall.
Yep, same thing.
It's like, I thought that was a cigarette.
Exactly, that was the joke. They
said that's my brand.
That Paul Rubin slipped that in as a joke, Paul Mall joke for the cigarettes. But oh, Pee Wee. Oh, Paul Rubin. Such a jokester. So NASA, we have some funnier lines delivered here. I think this is my favorite Faraday scene. Is he's lamenting that he's lost two of the greatest discoveries of the 20th century. He's like, what else could go wrong here? And then some lackey goes, hey, it's David's father.
He's like, whoa.
Hesseman is like, he gives such a great look take.
Yeah, just look.
But
right at the
it's funny that you mentioned like Reagan before. When I was rewatching this, I thought it was going to be, it's the president. And but it wasn't. It was his dad. But I thought they were going to go there with that.
But he really, I think, adopts the antagonist role here. At least as an adult, I'll look at this. I'm like, this is like the real pivotal moment where he just lies through his teeth.
This is the red line.
And just tells Bill that hey, everything's fine. He's just had a rough day and he wanted to be alone.
Yeah.
So
it is a lie of mission, or I don't know how you would even put it, but he's like, he just really wanted to get away from everybody. And I will tell him when I see him that you called.
Yeah. It's pretty weak. Pretty bad lie.
So we get a couple of cool effects here. We get the spaceship dives into the water, and then we get, this is where the spaceship where Max finally scans David's brain with this like green laser, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, that was a cool effect. But he gets more than he counted for.
Yes,
I kind of feel like this is the point,
because that's when the Pee Wee laugh comes out. Really,
yeah. Well,
right?
he tests it. He sort of does it at the very before this, and then after that, it goes in like in high gear. Like it's just
because he's
got all the
gotten
12-year-old mind now. And they start arguing and fighting like 12-year-olds would argue and fight. Like they're like bickering back and forth.
Yeah, and scuzzbucket.
Yeah, and like he's like telling them that you're not a superior being, I am, and like this whole. And I think at this point, this is kind of like where the movie starts dragging. I think a little bit. Like it feels like there's a lot of filler here, and there's this whole.
There's sequence. A lot of sort of back and forth antics as they kind of go up and down and back and forth, kind of.
Yeah, there's this whole situation where like he tells him that he insults Max somehow. I can't remember what he says now. He tells him he's inferior, I think. And Max like shoots up into space and then goes into a free fall and makes David learn how to fly the ship. And
which is really cool. Again, like all the little like control panels are all really cool, I think.
Yeah.
His little steering hand things are neat.
Yeah, I remember seeing when those came up and out, I just thought as a kid, just thinking that was the coolest thing ever as a way to steer a vehicle. To move it with the palms of your hands like that. And then, is this about the time when David starts flying it, but then he puts on some music, doesn't he?
No, that's coming up. That's a good. I mean, that's actually maybe 10 or 15 minutes down the road here.
Oh, but this is when they kind of get lost. They're going the wrong way, and they wind up in the wrong place.
So Carolina goes after he learns how to fly. Carolina goes and warns the family, and it's kind of this weird. I was like cracking up, and I'll send you guys texts last night there in this whole scene. Like Carolyn's at the Freeman house, and she's telling the parents, "Hey, they're keeping David," and then David vanished with a spaceship, and he's flying around now, and she's completely in the know as an intern.
Yeah.
And then she sees a bunch of NASA goons, is what I call them. These guys are like hanging out, and like it's so, to me it was so comical. Like they're hanging out in this van, like this.
It's like they're G-men.
Nondescript, van, and
with a cell phone, which was pretty rare at that time.
Yeah, with a big block cell phone, and and Carolyn is like, "Hey, you got a back door to this place?" And she's like, "Yeah, it's in the back."
Yeah, that was real helpful. I laughed at that too. You have a back door? Yeah, it's in the back. Thanks.
She slips out immediately, and they grab her and whisk her away, and that's when David's like flying all over the world now.
Right. This has the worst shot in the entire movie.
You talking about the Asians with the cameras?
Yes.
They go to Tokyo.
He thinks it's Fort Lauderdale, but it's Tokyo. So they have him fly. He flies like over a block of allegedly Tokyo, but it's this really awful process shot. It looks so bad. They've got like 6 Asian people, like, because obviously they didn't go to Tokyo. They like put 6 Asian people in front of a green screen and are like, oh, look up in the sky. Now look this way, and I'll take out cameras and take pictures.
Asians be taking pictures.
Yes, so it's a nice little, hilarious little.
And now we get this really bad like 80s montage again. And like I said, this is kind of the part of the movie I feel like really starts dragging. Is this him trying to get home and like just, but there's all these like bad crossfades too. Like I don't like crossfades. I used to, but as a video guy, I've gotten over it now. So
we all develop
star wipe.
Guys, I used to like them, but like I moved on to star wipes. So.
Never a crossfade, man.
Yeah, stay away from the crossfades.
Yeah, but they get real heavy with the sort of episodic gags of like them running into people along the way back home.
So this is where they run into the geeks. So they're flying over Texas, and there's this. I mean, I need to look up the song.
Okay, that's what I got confused with earlier. That one was a made up, like, it's a Cure parody that they, like, part of the team came up with. It's like not a real song.
Yeah. I didn't think of them as geeks. I thought of them more as just kind of like punk kind of.
I didn't think of them.
So he kind of comes in behind them and asks them for directions, and then they like floor it.
But didn't they have like a vintage Mustang or something?
Yeah, they had this really nice Mustang, which is not a very punk car to have.
I thought it was so weird. It was like these sort of rad 80s teens, sort of punk rock, and they're driving this like really nice vintage Mustang.
They should have been like in a beat up old Impala or something. I mean,
yeah.
So that's what, this whole geek thing, like, because he kept calling Max a geek, or there's this whole back and forth, and then Max wanted some clarification of, were those geeks? And this is where the music comes in. We get another montage. So David or Max asks about the music, and he plays the song back that they heard in the car, and then he tunes in to some good old Beach Boys.
Oh man, I love that scene because I love the Beach Boys at this point in my life.
Yeah,
and I completely love this scene.
I never hear that song without thinking of this scene, ever. I always think of this movie when I hear that song.
I like how they dub in the synth drums later on when they're flying around. They like to maybe modernize it. It's like on top of the song.
Oh, I didn't even notice.
I didn't notice that either. Yeah,
that's great. I wonder if they had Uncle Jesse come in to do that
on a keyboard,
lay that down. Yeah.
So after they do sort of this dance number, I mean, not a true dance number, but he's showing Max on the dance, they end up at good old Al's Gator City.
This was probably my favorite scene of the movie when I was a kid. I thought this was hilarious.
I thought it was hilarious too, and I'm like, in my notes here, I'm like going, was this really necessary though? I mean, I guess he needed to call home, but he shows up, and hops out, and you get.
I just love how when the stairs come down, they go on the little like ding thing.
That's right.
That makes the gas station thing go ding. Yeah. I don't know why I thought that was so funny.
And there's a girl in an Epcot shirt, so this family shows up, and one of the little girl's wearing an Epcot T-shirt,
which I don't remember from a kid, but when I saw that knocked me down. That was amazing. And the other kid's got a Miami Vice shirt, so they're really like,
oh, that's nice. Cool.
Yeah, and what's Max say to Big Al? He says something like, "Hey, Blimpo, oink oink,
oink oink, too many Twinkies,
too many Twinkies." Yeah,
which that. I probably said a lot as a kid because I
did too. Like I'm thinking
Twinkies.
Back, going, I thought that was hilarious. I used to say it too.
Apparently, this was I couldn't find much about this movie when I was like researching it, but so you have to fall back on stuff you see on IMDb, which I'm always like iffy about. But according to IMDb, this scene was filmed at like a ranch in Florida owned by Burt Reynolds.
Yes, I found that out too. It's crazy.
Which makes it even better. Even better somehow.
The Joey Cramer interview, he said that it was Burt Reynolds' ranch, and like Burt Reynolds used that shack in a ton of his movies.
What?
And
wow!
That he used to always whenever he could, he'd shoot a scene of Burt Reynolds' movies on his ranch, so he could go hang out at his ranch while they were shooting. And Joey said that they got to stay in this. It was a big hunting ranch too, and he got to stay in this big tree house that Burt Reynolds had built.
What?
And it was crazy. They showed a picture of it, and he said they had white deer, like they weren't like albino, but they were like these snow white deer that ran around the ranch, and he said that always stuck out in his mind as a kid, remembering that.
Crazy.
Yeah, so they
Burt
shot
Reynolds'
for
treehouse.
For I think they said they spent 3 weeks there shooting that one scene.
What?
Wow.
I laughed at, you mentioned the kids, the one in the Epcot shirt and the one in the Miami Vice shirt, but it's this family that pulls up in the station wagon, and the dad is such a goober. He's like this really jerky 80s dad.
I mean, he is a real, I knew people like that. He's like an archetype. Yeah. It's just...
He's like, mind if my wife uses the little girl's room? But my favorite line is the kids are looking at the spaceship, and they all think it's like a tourist thing. And he's like, get out from under there, kids. They don't have insurance in places like this.
And then he says, your Indian village isn't going to win any awards. But
yeah, but the spaceship's nice.
Top notch.
Yeah, so good.
I put in my notes here, like David goes up to Big Al and asks him for some change to call home, and then he goes and makes a collect phone call.
Oh, I didn't even notice that.
Yeah, Big Al's all right. Yeah,
yeah, Big Al was nice to like hand over the change and stuff. Well, and then he gets like
then he takes the change bar. And buys a Nestle Crunch bar.
Nestle Crunch. Yeah, I totally didn't catch that he made a collect phone call. That's funny.
Yeah, I was just remember watching it, and I thought, did he get money from Big Al? And then they said it's a collect phone call from.
Oh, that's funny. Continuity. Come on.
So he makes the phone call. Jeff picks up the phone, and David's like, hey, I need to get over there. I don't know where I'm going. And David's like, I'll set some fireworks off, or I'll put the house on fire or do something. Let you know. So
if I have to set the fire to the house, you'll find it.
Such a cool guy.
Anybody else find it strange that they were watching The Price is Right at like dusk?
Yes. I put that in my notes as well. I went because earlier, not much earlier. It's daytime.
Yeah.
And then they show all of a sudden now it's dark and they're watching the.
They played with time a little bit. I think here on some of these shots.
Everybody knows Price is Right is at 11 a.m.
Yep. Maybe they recorded it. Maybe Bill likes to record The Price is Right and watch it later.
He had a Betamax machine he used.
Or he's one of these
an early adopter.
Yeah, he's one of these one of these game show guys who watches all the shows and learns the prices and then goes back.
Yeah, there's a sub story there. So there's
he
a
seemed
spin-off.
like a creep. A mild creep. So maybe that's like a good.
Yeah.
And then I think in my interview I saw with Veronica Cartwright, she was laughing that she said that that Bill Freeman must have been doing all right because they had that waterfront house and they moved to another waterfront house.
Yeah. I always wondered why.
Although it did seem like they downgraded. Yeah,
they did.
It seemed like they went to like right under an overpass.
Yeah,
that
was weird.
Swingy. Yeah, still water.
Still had glass bricks. So
this is interesting here. Last night, in these next couple of scenes here, they're on the spaceship and they're trying to find their way home, and and David's haircut kept changing. I thought it's really a strange continuity.
I noticed that too.
So the interview today with Joey Cramer, he said that they had shot. I thought maybe they had a separate ending. That they shot a separate ending. I was sitting there thinking there's a reason why there's this change because his face looks different. Like you can see he's grown up a little bit.
Yeah, he's like put on more weight in the face a little bit.
And then in the interview today, he said that they shut down or they released him from production. He immediately went back to Vancouver where he was from and bleached his hair blonde and because he was in the skateboarding scene as a kid and he said they called him back and said they need to do some reshoots. So they put a wig on him and he said it was maybe 6 or 8 months later. So I guess he was hitting puberty and starting to grow pretty quick. But so you could definitely those scenes were definitely jumping out to me. And he was like if nobody ever catches that, I'm like, hey, I felt pretty.
That's so funny because I totally noticed that, and
he said that there was a separate ending. He didn't say that they reshot those scenes because of the separate ending, but there was another ending that they shot that they didn't like. So, where Max blows up, and dies.
Good God.
What?
Yes.
He becomes the Christ figure.
Well, evidently, like there's like this whole like this armada of ships show up, is what they had planned, and like because Max had helped David, and instead of, and then they decided that, and then Max like self-destructs.
What?
Man, so really, truly Christ figure. Wow.
And then they thought that was a little too dark, and
yeah, you think? Oddly, that didn't test well with families.
I thought it'd been better.
Like Pee-wee's death scream. Ah.
So
top of the world.
Jeff sets the fireworks off here.
Okay, all right. So back, the fireworks. Are we supposed to believe that they kept the same fireworks this whole time?
I had in my notes
that,
it was very unsafe keeping those fireworks in the attic for like 8 years or whatever.
Right.
That was another like impression for me in North Carolina as a North Carolinian child. Yeah. Just the amount of fireworks they had seemed just completely implausible and outrageous.
Yeah, it was shocking as a kid that he would have all those fireworks.
But Jeff mentions that earlier in the first act that their mom kept everything. From that day. He says that she didn't throw anything away from that.
You got to get the explosive stuff out of there.
But yeah, you're probably. I mean, the fireworks are. Come on. But I guess that was their big thing that night, and she clings to that.
But we were supposed to set them off,
so she clings to it. So she was a mom in crisis,
clinging to your fireworks and religion.
So it's sort of the big pivotal moment now. David sees the fireworks. He comes down. NASA shows up at the same time. He's fighting with, do I want to go to the safety of my family in 1986, or do I want to risk my own life and try to get back to 78? Because I don't think we mentioned it earlier, but there's this whole he can't travel back in time because he's too frail because he's a human, and
a small oversight on Max's part.
Yeah. I just set up.
But they don't really hit that note too many times. So when he decides to stay, it's a little shocking.
Yeah. I figure we should say that Max's MO is to take things to be experimented on, then brings them back, puts them back in the exact time and place they were taken. And he does that with everybody except David, because David can't go back in time.
Right. And they say that, and then, he's getting delivered, which you think is the kind of climactic moment where he's going to be reunited with his family, and then, he chooses not to.
He's like, I'll be a prisoner the rest of my life, or whatever.
So the ship goes up into space. He makes the decision to go up, and that's why this is kind of. I laughed at this scene. It didn't strike me as a kid as being funny, but it goes up and then sort of just vanishes into thin air. It goes into this time vortex, I guess, is what we're supposed to believe, right?
Yeah.
It's Disney's ending of 2001, The Space Odyssey.
So it's all this lightning and this weird, like I said, sort of vortex, and they're flying, at some ungodly speed.
It's a really cool effect. This whatever they are is really cool.
And I give the special effects department. They're bringing it strong in this movie.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like ILM. It was
it was just nobody companies.
It was this.
Yeah.
I love the little swirl effect. Max goes into this trance kind of, and gets this little swirl in his eye. And I don't know how they did it, but it's a really neat little effect.
Yeah, I don't know. He said that Joey said that they had this lamp they'd used to be able to make the effect, but again, he didn't really understand how as a 12-year-old and that back then. But it's pretty cool effect. But I put here and I feel so proud of myself for that. In my notes that there feels like there's been a lot of reshoots at the ending. I wonder if there was a second ending that they cut, which we found out today that there was. But he lands. He exits the vortex, and like everything sort of goes black, and it cuts immediately, and he's lying in the ravine again, and the train's going by just like it was, and you wonder, did he make it? Is everything right?
Seems promising. He's in a ravine.
Promising. Yep. Everything's
it's a start.
It's a start. Yeah. And he runs home, and everyone's getting ready to hop on the boat, and he waves, or they wave him to come over, and his mom, hugs him, and he tells his mom he loves her, and he tells Jeff he loves him.
But he tells his mom, "I love you," and she says, "Thank you."
Hey, come on, Veronica.
Well, I mean, she doesn't know he's
right.
Been gone.
Right. Still.
She's just kind of like taken aback. She's like, "Oh, well, thank you."
Thank you.
That's good.
Then you say, "I love you" after "thank you," but I mean, just go, thanks.
So Jeff and David have sort of a moment. Jeff sort of has this empathetic moment. He apologizes for and ask him if he's mad, and he says, "No, I love you too." And everyone has this sort of goofy look take, and the Puckmarin pops his head out of his backpack, and there's just sort of this wink wink moment between Jeff and David,
and Jeff's face is just tragic. Really hilarious acting.
All right, look confused,
when he pulls
kid.
Bobby Frick out of the backpack.
As the fireworks are going off for the 4th of July, we see a streak go through the sky, and we hear the "See you later, Navigator" line from Wee Herman, and we roll credits.
All right, so we've all made it home to Fort Lauderdale. Now it's time to rate this thing. I think tonight we will rate it with the scale of the scuzzbucket. So 1 to 5 scuzzbuckets, being a good thing, I guess, because it's family. We're going to start with plot and writing, and I will start with Andy
All right,
Brown.
so just so we're clear, so 5 scuzzbuckets is good? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's brothers, scuzzbucket.
I really like this story. I mean, it's not the greatest story in the world, but I think it's strong. There are a few weird, small little plot things here and there, but for the most part, I think it's really solid. So I'm going to give it a 4.
4. All right, Robert, what you got?
Yeah, I'm gonna go with 4 on this. I mean, there's very little I can complain about. In the plot and the writing.
Okay, and Michael?
I'm going with a 4 too. I think it's a really cool idea.
Yeah, I'll say 4 too. I just agree with what everybody said. Casting. Michael, we'll go back to you.
I will say, most of the movie hangs on Joey Cramer, and I can't really say anything bad about him. I'll go with a 5 on this because there's nobody I think that really is a sore note as far as casting goes.
Okay, and Robert?
I'm going to go with a 4. I mean, there's not any like big time whiffs, but I just feel like I can't give it a complete 5, just out of for whatever the reason.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. I think it's not quite. Yeah, I'll put it as a B if we're rating it in letters. 4 for me.
I'm going to go ahead and say 4 as well. I felt, they were strong, but, they weren't stellar, but they were very strong.
Which brings us to the related acting, and I will start. I will say I thought Joey Cramer did a great job. I thought Howard Hesseman was excellent. So I'll give it a 4, and we'll go to Andy.
Yeah, I completely agree. Those two really stood out to me. I thought the rest were just kind of meh, but so I'll stick with a 4.
Michael?
Yeah, I'll go with a 4 on that. Pretty much echo your similar.
Oh, well, there's a lot of consensus. Robert?
Yeah.
I'm going to I'm going to go with a 4 as well. There wasn't any scene. I mean, there were some really good scenes I thought from Joey Cramer, and then there was a few kind of whiffs here and there. But I mean, it certainly was strong enough to warrant a 4 in my book, though.
Which brings us to production value, and I will start. And just for the special effects and music, I'm going to give this a 5. I thought also the location of Fort Lauderdale and the way they used it was pretty evocative. I thought it was a cool location to shoot at, even though it's mostly just people's houses on the water. So I'm going to give it a 5. I thought the design was great. Andy?
Yeah, I'm going to echo you. I mean, for the time, it was just incredible. Yeah. So 5.
Michael?
I too will go with a 5. I think they could have done a little more with the NASA stuff, like to give it a real Cape Canaveral vibe. But I mean, that would be hard to do. But everything from the effects, which were amazing, especially for the time, I'll go with 5.
Yeah, that's probably a line in the sand that NASA drew when they were giving consent to use their logo.
Yeah, that's kind of how I felt. But I'm gonna give it a 5 as well. I think the special effects were amazing for 1986, and they still hold up pretty well today. I mean, it's not great, but I mean, it's still believable. And,
right. Finally, entertainment value. Michael Crawford, what do you say?
I will, just as a legacy award recipient, I can't give it any less than a 5. Like, this movie blew me away when I was a kid, and I still think it's fun. So I'm going with a 5.
Okay. Andy?
This is tough because I want to give it a 5 for all these exact same reasons, but I don't feel like I can get. It's not a perfect movie. To me, a 5 scuzzbuckets is a perfect movie. Yeah. So I'm going to have to go on the lower end of that and just say I'm going to go with a really strong 4.
And I agree with that. I want to give it a 5 so bad, but I want to leave room for the 5 movie for me. But it is as close as you can get because I was very entertained. I watched it, like I said, when I got Disney Plus, I watched that the first night. I watched it twice for this, and no problem watching it that many times. I just enjoyed it. Robert?
I'm going to go with a 4 as well, and for the same reasons Andy says. I mean, it's not a perfect movie, but it's pretty doggone close. And for nostalgic reasons, I loved it as a kid. I bet I've watched it at least 5 or 6 times in the last 2 or 3 years. Just, I mean, of course, 3 of those 5 were over the last week. But I have gone back to the well several times in the last couple of years just to watch it for fun. So, I mean, it's definitely a 4. I mean, it's entertaining. I like to watch it over and over again.
All right, so let's plug this one into our computer that wore 10 issues. We might have a new winner.
We do have a new winner, folks. We are sitting at a 4.3.
Wow, that is a solid B+ right there.
Yes.
A-, yeah. So a new pole position leader in our movies. What did Leonard Maltin say about this movie? Did he say anything about this movie?
Well, Leonard Maltin hasn't had much to say about this movie, much to my disappointment. In his review, he says, he calls it, and this is very brief, adequate entertainment for kids.
What?
Oh, boo.
Which I
Leonard.
think is a major
Leonard.
whiff by Leonard.
Leonard was busy with E.T. at that point. He was on Entertainment Tonight all the time when we were kids.
He was.
Maybe he didn't have time to see it. You know, it does
I was very disappointed.
It comes out between these giant movies that, if we mentioned E.T. and Back to the Future, there's some overlap there. So maybe, you could argue it kind of falls in between those, but I think it has its own unique thing. And I mean, like we said, we belong to a specific generational moment where it was a pretty big movie.
But that makes me wonder, what did your parents think? When I assume they saw it. What was their impression?
I think they liked it. I mean, I've never heard them talk ill of it.
Oh god, Flight of the Navigator.
I'm trying to remember, but I
can't believe they dropped the S-bomb.
Well. Yeah, true.
I do remember my mom making some comment about that.
Yeah,
but for me, like it was like one of those you hear the term remote drop movies. If you're flipping channels and you see it that it's on, like TNT is always running the Shawshank Redemption and that sort of thing. You always stop and watch it no matter where it is. But as a little kid, it was always on the Disney Channel. It felt like in those early days of the Disney Channel, and if it was on, I was going to watch it. I mean, it was one of those moments. If I saw it on the Disney Channel, I was going to sit down and watch it, regardless of where it was in that movie.
That's a good point. I remember when it was like on the cover of Disney Channel magazine, which was a thing they would send out to subscribers, and being so hyped for it to be on that.
Right.
Well, this movie was a success, and I think it was really a cult classic for our generation. There were only a couple of places to see anything about it in the years that followed, though. And those of us who remember the old backstage tour at the Disney MGM Studios theme park in Orlando, Florida, they had one of the ships. One of the
two
scout
of them
ships.
For a while.
Yeah, they had two of them. And
like the actual ship, like you could
like the practical set. It was just like sitting out by the.
There in the
They had one with the door open and one with the door closed.
Yeah.
There's rumor that there's one of the ships ended up as a prop over in Tomorrowland at Disney.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, and I only learned this really within the last year or so. I don't know how this had escaped my notice because it's such a big deal. But it is the top of, there's a Coke stand. It used to be a ticket stand, then it was a DVC kiosk, and now it's a Coke stand, I believe, there by the Speedway. And it's painted so you can't tell that it's, it's not silver anymore. But it's on top of this little stand. It's there. So it's pretty wild. And once you see it, you totally recognize it. But for some reason, it had escaped my notice.
It's wild. I never had any idea about that until very recently either. It's just, who knew? Hidden in plain sight.
I know. But I'm glad it survived. And I can't remember if they moved the one that was on the Studios tour to the studio in Paris.
I think they did, and it's rotting away if it's still there, just completely.
I know, which is a shame because, as a kid, when they put it out and seeing it in person was super exciting. It was so cool.
Right.
So back in 2009, there's been a lot of rumor that, this movie has this legacy, clearly. We all feel that connection to it, and that our generation, and we're getting to that age now where we're making decisions in Hollywood, the people our age, and there's been some kick around about Disney doing a remake of this movie. It has Jim Henson's been attached to it. His company has been attached to it in some fashion. But as of September of 2017, according to Wikipedia, of course, it's sort of been stalled. But I just wanted to kind of pitch this out to you guys. If they do a remake, do they stick to the dark, NASA government themes, or do you see them trying to maybe be a little less dark in that area and more campy, or maybe even have an internet tie-in? How do you see the story? Or you just see them tell the same story again?
Yeah, I would think they would have to stick to something similar with dark government, NASA, like that. Because that's really there's a charm to that. There's that works really, really well. I don't see what else could they possibly do.
They should make it the military is trying to it should be more militaristic. The military is trying to get this secret weapon from this UFO, and this kid has the key to it. Yeah,
it would be funny if it wound up being because I was thinking the same thing. Painting NASA as the bad guy is just kind of weird,
right?
That's what I was going to say. Yeah,
having it be like the CIA or the military or something, and then maybe having somebody from NASA be a good guy that's trying to help him out would work.
It could be Dr. Faraday's son or daughter, who works at NASA.
Yeah, wow. So they had. I was going to echo what Michael just said. Is that growing up, I never thought NASA evil. I always it was always the Air Force was hiding, aliens in Roswell, New Mexico, and and there was always the CIA and the FBI were always sort of the bad guys in our government. But I never looked at the NASA as being the bad guy. As a kid, I never felt that way.
I did, I guess, simply because of E.T., because they're the bad guys in E.T., aren't they?
That's true. What was up with that? Yeah, it was like a theme running through. Well, there are two ways you could do it. You could do just a straight remake, then you could do a sequel where David's like the crazy old like UFO conspiracy nut.
Ooh, I think that's good one, yeah.
Grizzled somewhere in a cabin or something, and Sarah Jessica Parker is the president.
They have a bunch of evil Maxes come back and start abducting people like crazy.
She could be the mayor of Fort Lauderdale too. That'd be
the mayor of Fort Lauderdale,
or just play herself. That'd be great.
And she still has
she's
Ralph
a single
as her
woman
chief
living
of
in
staff.
New York City now.
Yeah, Sex and the City version.
Yeah. But I mean, I think it's a natural to remake because it's a cool story and there's a lot they could do with it.
Yeah, I agree. I think
especially just from special effects, it would just be cool to see how they would update it.
Would Paul Reubens reprise his role? We don't know.
Well, while watching this and working on it last night, I stumbled onto a documentary that somebody made, and hasn't been widely distributed, but it's called Life After the Navigator. It was released last year, and it's about Joey Cramer, and evidently poor Joey's had some tough times, but I just sort of watched the trailer, and then I saw some interviews from it that they had released. But it was kind of cool. He gave some perspective to the movie, and he talked about growing up with it as his legacy, because he hadn't done a lot since. But I mean, I really want to try to find this documentary now. But it was called Life After the Navigator.
Yeah, I was sad to see. I had not heard of that, and I want to check that out. I was sad to see that he had fallen on the hard times because it was such an iconic thing at the time, and you identified so strongly with him, being roughly the same age, and
right.
He was in a couple of things for Disney, but then after this, I think he did one more thing, and then quit acting. And I mean, I think he was a good actor especially for the time.
In his interview, he said that he sometime in his teens, he just said, I kind of want to be a kid. I don't want to be an actor anymore. I want to enjoy my childhood. And he seems like he has gotten his life back together in his interviews. He's doing better. So stick with it, Joey.
Yeah.
All right. So wrapping up this movie, any closing thoughts? I think we've kind of summed up a lot of how we feel. But anybody have anything else?
Great movie. Like I said, I mean, it's good to have. I mean, I would say it's good, but it's fun to have a movie that we seem to all agree with.
Yes, consensus.
I like the movies when we kind of argue with each other, but this has been fun to have a situation where we're all kind of on the same page.
Yeah,
I just love that it's a movie that it wasn't something that everybody talked about for a long time, but once you reach a certain age, then you find out that everybody has the same memory. That's always kind of fun to be like, oh yeah, I remember that too, and everybody has a sort of similar vibes about something. Is pretty cool.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it was a movie. It's been a while since I've seen this movie, but I mean, it just brought back all those feelings, all those memories, and I loved it then, and I love it now.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with all of that, and it is funny because it didn't seem to have the staying power as some other movies that we mentioned, but it does have the staying power with the memories of the people who liked it. So it was a pleasure, and it's going to be interesting to transition into the next movie next month, which was made at a very similar time period with some actors or actresses you may know, but doesn't seem to have carried on into our present day. So for some, I know Michael and I, for one, probably Robert too, this was a widely publicized movie in our tiny sphere, but a lot of people don't remember it. The Journey of Natty Gann.
Yeah. Andy, have you seen this one?
When you guys initially pitched it, I did not recall it, but I think I saw a picture. Is this about the girl and the wolf?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Don't spoil it, man. Don't spoil it.
I mean, that's all. I mean, it's on the cover. Yeah, but I did see this movie, but it's been 30 years.
It is a very different tone and setting, but like I said, it was made in a similar time period. So.
But you know what? It's very different tone and setting, and everything about it's very different. But these two movies, Flight of the Navigator and Nanny are like two peas in a pod in my brain.
Yes.
Because they came out close to each other. I think we saw them both 2 times in the theater. And it was that early Eisner era silver screen partners, whatever, sort of live action stuff. And they're both like really closely related in my mind.
It's the very beginning of the Eisner era. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah. And I really like it. I like it a lot too.
And of course, you can watch this on Disney Plus, as all of our other movies that we will be doing. So if you're on that, check it out and watch it with us. And one more thing before we're out of here, we want to give a shout out to Todd Naprick of Bindend Graphic Solutions for all our graphic design work you've been looking at. You can find him on Facebook or Upwork. Todd has been working with Robert for 20 years and does some great work. I mean, that is a long time. He does great work. He can do logos, promotional materials, websites, branding. He can even rebrand whatever you need. Todd's going to make you look good. And that is his website is Bindend, BYDAND graphics.com. Check him out. Boys, anything before we're out of here?
Everybody talk to us. Send us an email. Drop us a line on Twitter. Check us out on Instagram.
Yes, thank you.
Medfield Film.
Yes, and the email is info@medfieldfilm.com. And we will threaten to do a mailbag episode if you all just keep those emails coming in.
Yeah, please let us hear. We'd like to hear feedback and suggestions and comments and whatever.
So from all of us to all of you, we hope you have a good rest of your month, and we look forward to taking the journey of Natty Gann together. Good night.
Proud are we of mighty Medfield, alma mater dear. All your sons and daughters hail to thee, Medfield College of Technology. And while we hold your banner high, rock, rock, we shout your praises to the sky, rock, rock. For proud are we of mighty Medfield,